The phone screen lit up like a confession in the dark. Last night was perfect. Can't stop thinking about you. Not Mark's phone. Not his wife Emily's either. It was Jake's, left carelessly on the kitchen counter during a glitzy corporate dinner in suburban Chicago. The message was a gut punch, and the blurry photo that came with it was worse. Emily, unmistakable, in Jake's arms, her smile too warm, too familiar. Mark's chest tightened, but he didn't flinch. He stood frozen, the chatter of the party fading into a dull hum. This wasn't the moment to react. It was the moment to think. Mark, 35, was no stranger to high-stakes environments. An IT specialist who'd built secure systems for startups, he knew how to spot patterns, cracks in code, flaws in design. He'd always seen his marriage to Emily, 33, as a system that worked, flawed but functional. She was the spark, the founder of a rising tech startup, always pitching, always closing deals. He was the steady hand, the one who kept their life grounded while she chased the next big thing. They'd been a team for 8 years, or so he thought. Tonight, at this investor dinner in a sleek Chicago home, he wasn't so sure. The event was a showcase for Emily's company, a platform disrupting supply chain logistics. Investors, partners, and tech insiders mingled, their conversations a blur of buzzwords: scalability, user acquisition, ROI. Emily was in her element, navigating the room with a confidence that made heads turn. Mark watched her from the sidelines, nursing a whiskey he barely sipped. She introduced him to a few guests, a quick handshake, a polite, "This is my husband, Mark," before steering the talk back to her pitch. He was used to it. His role was support, not spotlight. But the phone changed everything. It was Jake's phone, left next to a bottle of Malbec. Jake, the business development guy, all charm and energy, always a little too close to Emily. Mark had met him a few times, quick hugs, slick compliments, eyes that lingered a beat too long. Mark hadn't thought much of it. Until now. The photo wasn't just a snapshot, it was evidence. Emily's face, glowing, pressed against Jake's. The message beneath it was casual but crushing. Mark didn't touch the phone. He didn't need to. The truth was already screaming. He stepped back as Emily entered the kitchen, her eyes flicking to the phone. A microsecond of panic crossed her face before she smoothed it into a smile. "Oh, there it is," she said, scooping it up like it was nothing. "Jake's always losing his stuff." Her voice was light, but it carried an edge, like she was testing him. She turned off the screen and tucked the phone away, meeting his gaze with a look that dared him to ask. "Everything okay?" she said, her tone too even. "Yeah," Mark replied, his voice steady, betraying nothing. She nodded and slipped back into the party, leaving him alone with the weight of what he'd seen. He didn't follow her. Instead, he leaned against the counter, his mind already working. This wasn't about one message. It was about a pattern he'd ignored for too long. Mark returned to the main room, where the dinner was in full swing. Emily was laughing with a group of investors, her hand briefly touching Jake's arm as he spoke. Jake leaned in, his grin too easy, too knowing. Mark watched, cataloging every gesture, every glance. He didn't cause a scene. He didn't need to. The room buzzed with deals and egos, but for Mark, it was silent, his focus narrowing to the two people rewriting his reality. He thought back to the signs he'd dismissed. The business trip to Minneapolis when Emily said she was in St. Paul, until a hotel receipt showed up in their bank statement. She'd brushed it off as a booking error. He believed her because he wanted to. Then there was the new watch she wore for a few weeks, sleek and masculine, gone as quickly as it appeared. She'd said it was a gift from a client, but the tan line lingered on her wrist like a signature. And her phone, once left casually on the counter, now always face down, silenced, never out of her reach. Mark didn't confront her that night. He shook hands, smiled at jokes he didn't hear, and played the part of the supportive husband. But inside, he was already planning. Emily's world was built on her image, polished, untouchable, a visionary who could sell anything. If she was hiding something, it wasn't just from him. It was from everyone. And Mark wasn't going to let her keep it buried. As they left the dinner, Emily linked her arm through his, her warmth familiar but distant. "You okay?" she asked, her breath soft against his shoulder. "I'm good," he said, the lie slipping out easily. She didn't press. They drove home in silence, the city lights blurring past. Mark's mind wasn't on the road. It was on the next step. He didn't want a fight. He didn't want apologies. He wanted the truth, and he wanted it to be undeniable. Emily had built her empire on trust from investors, partners, him. If she was breaking it, he'd make sure the world saw it. That night, lying in bed, Mark stared at the ceiling, Emily's breathing soft beside him. He didn't sleep. His thoughts were already moving, calculating. He'd spent years building systems that couldn't be hacked, couldn't be broken. Now he'd use those skills to expose a different kind of flaw, not in code, but in the life he thought he knew. The dinner was just the beginning. The real move was coming, and it would be precise, public, and impossible to ignore. Mark didn't confront Emily after the dinner. He didn't ask about the text, the photo, or Jake. Instead, he watched. His years as an IT specialist had taught him that truth hides in patterns, not outbursts. The phone incident wasn't a one-off. It was a crack in the system, and he needed to map the fault lines. Emily moved through their life as if nothing had changed. Morning coffee, late-night calls about her startup, quick smiles that felt rehearsed. But Mark saw the shifts. Her phone now stayed glued to her hand, her stories about work trips grew vaguer, and her eyes avoided his when she mentioned Jake. He started small, checking their shared accounts. A credit card statement showed a charge for a boutique hotel in Minneapolis, not the conference center in St. Paul where Emily claimed she'd stayed. She'd explained it away months ago, overflow booking, nothing closer to the venue, but the hotel's website listed only double occupancy suites. Then there was the scent on her scarf, faint but persistent, a woodsy cologne Mark didn't own. She'd laughed it off as an Uber driver's, but it lingered weeks later, clinging to her coat like a signature. Mark didn't accuse her. He gathered data. He logged into their home's security system, a setup he'd installed himself, and reviewed the motion alerts. Most were mundane, delivery drivers, stray cats, but one caught his eye, a late-night ping from the back door, timestamped during Emily's supposed leadership retreat last month. He pulled the footage. There she was, slipping into their house at 1:17 a.m., Jake behind her. They moved with ease, her hand brushing his as she closed the door. The grainy video showed them pause in the hallway, her lips meeting his, slow and deliberate. Mark's stomach churned, but he saved the clip, backing it up to a private drive. Emily's patterns were unraveling. She'd always been a planner, meticulous with her pitches and investor decks, but now her personal life showed the same precision, directed elsewhere. Mark noticed her weekend seminars had no receipts, no itineraries, just vague mentions of team building or personal growth. Once, he'd asked for the name of a retreat. She'd shut him down, invite only industry stuff. Her tone was final, a wall he wasn't meant to climb. He dug deeper. Her iCloud, still linked to their shared account, held deleted emails she hadn't fully erased. One from Jake, sent from his company address, "Can we meet at the usual spot? Need to talk before Detroit." Another from Emily, "Let's keep it quiet till after the pitch. Too much at stake." The words were careful, but the intent was clear. Mark screenshotted them, his hands steady despite the pulse in his temples. He found a train ticket stub in the trash. Jake's name, Chicago to Milwaukee, dated for one of her work trips. Each piece fit into a puzzle he hadn't wanted to solve. Mark's silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. He knew confronting Emily now would lead to denials, tears, or deflections. She was too good at spinning stories, and he wasn't ready to give her the chance. Instead, he observed, cataloging every inconsistency. Her laptop, once left open on the kitchen counter, was now password-locked, even for a quick bathroom break. She stopped asking him to plug in her phone, keeping it close like a guarded secret. Once, he overheard a voicemail through her Bluetooth speaker while she showered. "Hey, still thinking about last night. Can't wait to see you." She'd rushed out, towel-wrapped, claiming it was a friend's misdirected message. Her laugh was too quick, her eyes too sharp. The turning point came on a Saturday night, 3 weeks after the dinner. Emily announced a 2-day leadership seminar at a lakeside lodge 3 hours north. "Spotty cell service," she said, packing a slim suitcase. "Don't wait up." Mark nodded, wished her luck, and helped load her car. But the weight of her lies pressed harder now. He couldn't ignore the pattern anymore. That night, close to midnight, his phone buzzed with another security alert. Backdoor, motion detected. He opened the camera app, expecting nothing, a raccoon, maybe wind. But there was Emily, stepping inside barefoot, in a loose sweater and jeans. Jake followed, a wine bottle in one hand, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. They looked comfortable, like they'd done this before. The camera caught her smile as she led him through the hallway, her hand grazing his arm. They paused, kissed, not rushed but familiar, like a ritual. Mark saved the footage, his jaw tight, his mind clear. This wasn't suspicion anymore. It was proof. He didn't sleep. He sat on the couch, replaying the clip, timestamping each frame. The next morning, he drove home early, telling himself he just needed to see it for himself. The house was quiet, but the air held traces of coffee and wine. 2 glasses sat on the nightstand by their bed, hers and his. A pair of men's sneakers, size 11, rested in the mudroom, a crumpled train ticket tucked inside. Jake, Milwaukee to Chicago. Emily was still asleep, alone now, her side of the bed neatly made, the other untouched. She looked peaceful, unaware of the camera that had captured her truth. Mark didn't wake her. He poured coffee from the pot she'd brewed and sat at the kitchen island, staring out at the backyard where the camera had recorded her betrayal. When she came downstairs, startled to see him, she recovered fast. "Thought you were at your brother's," she said, her voice a mix of surprise and concern. "Plans changed," Mark replied, his tone flat. She watched him, her fingers tightening on her robe. "You okay?" she asked. "Just tired," he said, meeting her eyes. The silence between them said more than words ever could. Mark didn't confront her that day. He wasn't ready, not out of fear, but because he wanted the truth to hit harder than a kitchen argument. Emily's world was built on her reputation, her startup, her charm. If she was betraying him, she was betraying everyone who'd bought into her vision. Mark wasn't going to let her hide it. He had the footage, the emails, the tickets. Now he needed a plan, one that would expose her not just to him, but to the world she cared about most. And he knew exactly where to start, her big investor pitch in Detroit, the stage she'd built for herself. Mark's plan took shape in the quiet hours after the security footage confirmed his worst suspicions. Emily's betrayal wasn't just personal, it was a calculated deception woven into the fabric of her professional world. Her startup's big investor pitch in Detroit was days away, a make-or-break moment to secure funding from 3 major VC firms. She'd been prepping for weeks, her laptop humming with revised slides and practice runs. Mark saw his opportunity. If Emily wanted to play a role, he'd make sure the truth took center stage. He didn't act out of rage. Rage was messy, and Mark was precise. His years in IT had taught him how to exploit vulnerabilities without leaving a trace. The Detroit event, hosted in a historic hotel ballroom, was live-streamed for remote stakeholders, with a third-party AV vendor handling the tech. Mark recognized the vendor from a past project, a company that used a cloud-based system for slide management, accessible to speakers and texts. He saw his opening. Using a burner email and a spoof domain, Mark posed as a freelance AV tech troubleshooting a mock event deck. A few carefully worded messages later, he had limited back-end credentials. It wasn't hacking, it was social engineering, clean and untraceable. He waited until Emily uploaded her final presentation, 16 polished slides, each one a testament to her vision for disrupting logistics. The final slide was a simple thank you for believing in us. Let's build the future together. That's where Mark would strike. He downloaded her deck, duplicated it, and crafted a new final slide. It started with her thank you message, identical in font and design, but after 5 seconds, it would fade into a sequence of evidence. Screenshots of her texts with Jake, "Can't wait to see you tonight," a still from the security footage showing their hallway kiss, a train ticket with Jake's name, and an email from her, "Let's keep it quiet till after Detroit." The sequence ended with a black screen and white text, "Trust is not a pitch. It's a choice." The transition was seamless, professional, undeniable. He uploaded the altered deck under the original file name, knowing no one, especially Emily, would preview it end to end. She was too focused on her performance. In the days leading up to the pitch, Emily was a whirlwind of energy. She rehearsed in their living room, pacing as she recited stats on user growth and revenue projections. Mark played along, offering small nods of encouragement. "You've got this," he said when she hugged him before leaving for Detroit. "Thanks for always having my back," she replied, her smile bright but fleeting. He watched her car pull away, the weight of his plan settling like a stone in his chest. Mark didn't go to Detroit. He didn't need to. The live stream was accessible on the event's website, and he'd done his part. That evening, he sat in their quiet Chicago home, his laptop open to the stream. Soft jazz played as a countdown clock ticked down to 7:30 p.m. He poured a coffee, not a whiskey, and waited. His hands were steady, but his pulse wasn't. This wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity, about stripping away the lies Emily had spun for him, her investors, herself. The stream flickered to life. Emily took the stage, her presence commanding. She launched into her pitch with the ease of someone who'd done this 100 times. "We're not just a company. We're a movement," she said, clicking through slides on market trends and partnerships. The audience leaned in, nodding, some jotting notes. Jake sat near the front, his posture relaxed, a glass of wine in hand. Mark's eyes narrowed, but he stayed focused. Slide 5, Momentum Metrics. Slide 10, Funding Roadmap. Emily's voice was steady, her cadence perfect. She was closing strong, building to her finale. "Before I wrap up," she said, "I want to thank you all for believing in what we're building. This last slide is for you." The screen flashed her thank you message. Polite applause started. Then, the slide flickered. The room went still. Mark watched the stream as the thank you text dissolved into the first screenshot, a text from Jake, timestamped, explicit. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Emily froze, her eyes darting to the screen. The next image appeared, the security footage, her and Jake in their hallway, unmistakable. Then the train ticket, the email, each piece hitting like a hammer. The final black slide appeared. "Trust is not a pitch. It's a choice." The applause died. Someone coughed. Phones were raised, recording. Emily turned to the screen, her mouth parted, but no words came. The stream buffered for a moment, then cut to a wide shot of the stage. Her face was pale, her hands gripping the podium. Jake's head was down, his wine glass abandoned. The crowd murmured, a low hum of shock and whispers. Mark closed his laptop. He didn't need to see more. The truth was out, and it wasn't his to carry anymore. He stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the darkening Chicago skyline. His phone stayed silent, no calls, no texts. Emily would be scrambling now, maybe trying to spin it, maybe blaming a glitch. But the evidence was too clear, too public. Investors who'd praised her vision were now questioning her integrity. Jake, who'd coasted on charm, was exposed as complicit. Mark felt no triumph, only a strange calm. The system had crashed, and he'd been the one to pull the plug. He didn't sleep that night, but not out of guilt. His mind was already moving forward, calculating what came next. Emily's world was about to unravel, and he'd made sure it wasn't just his truth on the line. It was hers, laid bare for everyone she'd deceived. The Detroit pitch wasn't the end. It was the beginning of consequences. The fallout from the Detroit pitch was swift and merciless. Mark didn't hear from Emily that night. No calls, no texts, just a heavy silence that spoke louder than any argument could. He imagined the scene in the ballroom, investors exchanging uneasy glances, phones discreetly recording, Jake sinking into his chair as the screen exposed their affair. The live stream had cut off abruptly, but fragments were already online by morning, 15-second clips, grainy and vertical, circulating on Twitter and Reddit with captions like VC dinner gone wrong or startup scandal in Detroit. The internet didn't need the full story to feast. Mark stayed offline, avoiding the noise. He didn't need to see the memes or read the speculation to know what was happening. Emily's startup, once a darling of Chicago's tech scene, was imploding. A leaked email from a board member surfaced by noon, announcing an emergency meeting to address recent events impacting leadership credibility. Two major investors, firms Emily had courted for months, quietly withdrew their interest, redirecting funds to a rival company. A third issued a statement about reassessing partnerships. The company's social media went dark, its last post a generic "excited for Detroit," now buried under a flood of comments and screenshots. Jake vanished from the public eye. His LinkedIn profile, usually buzzing with updates, went silent. A former colleague posted on a tech forum that he'd been placed on unpaid leave, flagged for using company resources to book hotels for non-business purposes. One of the slides Mark had embedded showed a calendar invite from Jake's work email, a careless mistake that tied their affair to the company's dime. The HR investigation was already underway, and Jake's career was teetering. Emily called Mark the next afternoon. He let the phone ring twice before answering, his voice calm, controlled. "Hello?" A long pause followed, her breathing uneven on the other end. "I just need to know why," she said finally, her tone fragile, like glass about to crack. Mark didn't rush to fill the silence. "Because you made a choice," he said. "And I made sure everyone saw it." Another pause. "I didn't think you'd go that far," she whispered. "It went further than you planned," Mark replied. "But that's on you." She didn't argue. She didn't deny. The call ended with a soft click, and he knew she wouldn't call again that day. The text came next, a wave of shifting tones. First, denial, "You got it wrong. It wasn't what you think." Then justification, "Things haven't been right between us for a while. I didn't know how to tell you." Then blame, "You humiliated me in front of my entire world. Do you know what that cost?" Finally a plea, "Can we talk? Just once in person?" Mark didn't respond. Each message was another piece of evidence, saved to the same drive as the security footage and emails. He wasn't collecting them for leverage. He was building a record, a timeline of truth. A letter arrived the next day, hand-delivered, her handwriting uneven on the envelope. 3 pages, spilling apologies and explanations. She called the affair a mistake that snowballed, said Jake was a friend who filled a void during a stressful year. She admitted lying, hiding trips, crafting alibis. The Detroit stunt, she wrote, was cruel but deserved. She asked for a chance to explain, to rebuild. Mark read it once, then filed it with the rest. It wasn't about closure for him. It was about clarity, about never letting her rewrite the story. By the end of the week, Emily's name was erased from the company's website. The official statement called it a leave of absence, but a tech blog reported she'd been pressured to resign. The board needed a clean slate to salvage investor trust, and Emily, once the startup's strongest asset, was now its biggest liability. Her resignation didn't stop the chatter. A podcast clip resurfaced where she preached radical transparency in leadership, now mocked in comment sections and late-night talk show quips. The headlines were restrained but cutting. Startup star steps down amid personal controversy. The internet wasn't kind, but neither was it wrong. Mark's phone buzzed with messages from friends and colleagues. Some offered support. "I'm so sorry, man. You didn't deserve this." Others probed for gossip under thin concern. "Heard about the dinner. You okay?" He ignored most, replying only to his brother with a brief "I'm handling it." He wasn't looking for pity or validation. The truth was out, and that was enough. But the cost was real. Friends who'd once envied their marriage now tiptoed around him. A colleague from Emily's company messaged, "She always said you were her rock." "I had no idea." Mark archived it, no reply. Jake sent an email 3 days after the pitch, from a personal account. "Mark, I owe you an apology. I never meant to hurt you. I made mistakes. I hope you can forgive me someday." It was short, spineless, the kind of note written to ease guilt, not own it. Mark didn't respond. Some words didn't deserve an answer. Emily tried again, too. A voicemail, her voice shaking. "I know I messed up. I just want to talk." One night, she showed up at their house, standing on the porch in the dark. Mark watched from upstairs, her silhouette small and hesitant. She didn't knock, just waited, then left. He felt no urge to open the door. The space between them wasn't just physical anymore. It was a chasm built on her choices. The fallout wasn't loud or dramatic, it was surgical. Emily's world shrank as her reputation crumbled. Investors moved on, her team distanced themselves, and the startup she'd poured years into teetered without her. Mark didn't gloat. He felt hollow, not victorious. Exposing the truth hadn't rebuilt what was broken, it had only cleared the rubble. Now he faced the quiet aftermath, where the real work began, not punishing her, but reclaiming himself. Mark stood at a crossroads, the wreckage of his marriage behind him. The Detroit pitch had done its job, Emily's affair with Jake was exposed, her startup was in chaos, and the truth was undeniable. But the aftermath wasn't a victory lap, it was a quiet reckoning. Mark didn't want applause or sympathy. He wanted a path forward, one he could walk without looking back. Emily's resignation was official within days of the scandal. The board's statement was cold: leadership changes to ensure continued trust. Her name vanished from pitch decks and press releases, replaced by a new interim CEO. The company scrambled to stabilize, but 2 major contracts fell through, and a tech newsletter reported a 30% drop in projected funding. The internet kept the story alive. Clips of the fateful slide circulated, paired with snarky captions and threads dissecting Emily's fall. A late-night comedian even worked her radical transparency quote into a punchline. It stung, but Mark didn't linger on it. The world had seen her choices. That was enough. Jake's career took a parallel hit. His unpaid leave became permanent when HR confirmed he misused company funds for hotel bookings, one of which matched a receipt Mark had found in their shared account. A LinkedIn post from a former colleague hinted at his abrupt departure, and his online presence went dark. Mark didn't care about Jake's fate. He was a footnote, not the story. Emily's attempts to reach Mark tapered off. After the letters and voicemails, she sent one final text: "I'm moving out. Can we talk about the house?" He replied with a single line: "Contact my lawyer." He'd hired one the day after Detroit, a no-nonsense divorce attorney who specialized in clean splits. Mark wasn't after her money or assets, he wanted out, fully and finally. The lawyer drafted papers, and Mark signed them without hesitation. The house, once their shared dream, felt like a museum of lies. He was ready to let it go. He moved to a small apartment in downtown Chicago, a temporary lease to clear his head. Friends reached out, some with genuine concern, others fishing for details. "You're better off," his brother said over a call. "She didn't deserve you." Mark nodded, even if he didn't fully agree. It wasn't about deserving, it was about truth. He'd spent years ignoring cracks in their marriage, smoothing over doubts to keep the peace. Now, he saw those cracks for what they were, not his failures, but her choices. Emily sent one last letter, forwarded by his lawyer. It was shorter, no pleas or excuses. "I know I broke us. I'll carry that forever. I hope you find peace." Mark read it, then shredded it. Peace wasn't something she could give him, it was something he'd have to build. He started small, reconnecting with old colleagues, taking on freelance IT projects, running along Lake Michigan at dawn. The routine grounded him, a reminder that he could rebuild without her shadow. The tech world moved on, as it always did. Emily's startup limped along under new leadership, but its momentum was gone. A competitor swooped in, poaching clients and talent. Mark heard through a mutual contact that Emily had taken a low-profile consulting gig in Seattle, far from Chicago's spotlight. He didn't wish her ill, but he didn't wish her well either. Her consequences were her own. Jake surfaced briefly, posting a vague apology on a private blog: "I made mistakes and hurt people. I'm working on being better." Mark saw it shared in a group chat, rolled his eyes, and muted the thread. Accountability wasn't a blog post, it was action, and Jake had none to offer. Mark's own actions became his focus. He took a contract with a cybersecurity firm, a role that let him travel and dive into complex systems, work that felt like a return to himself. He joined a weekend hiking group, not for companionship but for the quiet of the trails. One evening, over beers with a colleague, he laughed for the first time in months, a real laugh, not the forced kind he'd worn at investor dinners. It felt like a signal, a sign that the hollow space inside him was starting to fill. The divorce finalized 6 weeks later. The house sold, the proceeds split evenly. Mark kept only what he needed: his laptop, a few books, and the hard drive with the evidence, not as a trophy but as a reminder of what he'd walked away from. He didn't hate Emily or Jake. Hate was too heavy to carry. Instead, he felt a clarity he hadn't known in years. The truth had cost him a marriage, but it had given him something else: control over his own story. One night, scrolling through a news feed, Mark saw a post about a new startup conference in Chicago. Emily's name wasn't mentioned, but her former company was struggling to regain traction. He closed the app and stepped onto his balcony, the city lights sprawling below. The air was crisp, the kind that hinted at spring but still carried winter's edge. He thought about the security footage, the texts, the slide that changed everything. Not with anger, but with resolve. He'd expose the truth not to destroy, but to free himself. The moral wasn't revenge or ruin. It was simpler: lies unravel, and truth endures. Emily and Jake had built a house of cards, and Mark had let the wind blow through. Now, standing alone, he was rebuilding, step by step, choice by choice, on ground he could trust.